Hi, I want to say a few words about today's dramatic developments in Ukraine, with Russia's illegal annexation of, I believe it's 5 regions, um, under these sham referendums. This is a major escalation because it's a very manipulative move by the Kremlin on the grounds that if Ukraine um, attacks Russian positions in those areas, the Kremlin will frame it as an attack on Russian soil, which of course it isn't. Um, Even Russia's allies and those sitting on the fence, which in my view is pathetic. I don't know what India is playing at. But anyway, even they condemned this. I think China is probably getting jittery about things. I mean, China is never going to back the West over Russia. China, Beijing's never going to come out and say we support our Western colleagues. Russia's wrong. Um, but I think honestly, behind the scenes, I think Beijing will be frustrated. I think they'll be thinking, um, how long can we support Russia for? Because they don't want secondary sanctions. And certainly China is now a more powerful country than Russia. And I think they're sort of seeing Russia as possibly an Achilles heel. India condemned the actions, but still abstained from the vote, which is just inexplicable, and in my view, a failure of leadership. But anyway, the Foreign Office today, the British Foreign Office had a message on its Instagram and other social media pages. Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Crimea are Ukraine. Um, when history's written, Liz Truss will possibly go down as one of our short-serving prime ministers. She's in a bad position right now domestically. But I hope history is at least fair to her and gives her credit where credit is due in terms of her support for Ukraine, support that she's continued from her predecessor, Boris Johnson. As much as I'm disgusted by this situation, I'm pleased that my country at least is on the right side of history. But it's kind of sinister watching those scenes from Moscow with Putin addressing the pretty sizable crowds. I don't know what the numbers are. I'm guessing a few thousand at least. Fanatical nationalism. And it shows that even now, despite the counter protests last week against the draft, and the fact that thousands and thousands of Russian men are fleeing the country, and there's growing anger in Russia, Putin's propaganda apparatus is still quite strong. Strong enough to bring out certainly thousands. I think there's going to be tensions in Russian society. Now, there was a mass shooting the other day which got a bit of attention in a school. That may have no connection to any of this. There's been several mass shootings in Russia recently. 13 killed, including children. Um, but I wouldn't at all be surprised if there's things going on with the mental health of Russian citizens because of the effects of just everything that's happening. There was also a shooting in a recruitment office, apparently, in Siberia. Um, the school shooting took place in the city of Ishevsk, if I'm pronouncing that right. But honestly, looking at those scenes from Moscow, it just reminded me of Hitler addressing Nuremberg rallies, really. And I say that with no flippancy. That's honestly what it reminds me of. And some people might think this is crass, but it's my sincere feeling. I believe the world will be a better place when Putin is dead. I sincerely believe that. I think this man is dangerous. Um, there's certainly other tyrants in this world, but even Xi Jinping isn't this reckless. Xi Jinping isn't casually threatening nuclear war. The closest he came was talking about smashing the heads of China's enemies, but which was vulgar and thuggish. But no, Putin is He's a fairly dangerous character, and I think that now Ukraine is trying to fast forward its bid to join NATO. There was a period where Zelensky and Kyiv were saying that they would consider putting this on hold as a way of getting peace, but time and time again, Russia has shown it doesn't want peace. Putin's been humiliated. And when you have a tyrant who's red faced, that's a very dangerous situation. I think what's most alarming about all of this is the fact that Russia is the world's biggest nuclear state. I mean, we're not talking about North Korea here. We're talking about Russia. It's potentially very dangerous, and this situation's only escalated today. Jens Stoltenberg has said that if countries want to join the NATO, it's their sovereign right. Mark my words, you will get Putin shills across the internet claiming, oh, well, let's just prove Putin was right because Ukraine wanted to join NATO and Russia's being encircled. The lies that they spin out are so pathetic because it just twists the narrative of reality. The reality is Russia invaded Ukraine, NATO did not invade Russia. The reality is these referendums are a sham. I mean, today, people trying to flee those Russian controlled areas, civilians, were shelled. At least 25 killed. Horrifying scenes. And that just adds to the thousands already killed and wounded in Putin's war. Um, I've just had a little exchange with a guy who was getting into waterboutry and he mentioned Iraq. Well, that was an invasion by Britain and America, but there's differences. Britain and America, immoral as that was, it was one of our worst ever foreign policy decisions, in part because it allows apologists for dictators to dredge it up every time it suits them. But a big difference is Britain and America never questioned Iraq's sovereignty. That was about weapons of mass destruction that turned out not to be there and about the tyranny of Saddam Hussein. And I don't think any honest person would deny that Saddam was a brutal tyrant. But anyway, it was never about questioning Iraq's existence as a nation state. Now, Iraq today is run by Iraqis. Um, it was never annexed by Britain and America. People could say the post-war situation was appalling. They could say a lot of things about it. But I do think the two situations are different, and I think it's just lazy to say they're one and the same. Now, both situations involved invasions, but invasions based on different premises. And the difference with Ukraine is Russia under Putin doesn't even recognize Ukraine as a sovereign state. Um, I really hope that Zelensky and his officials are taking note of all those countries, not that there's many of them, but countries and officials who are appeasing Putin. I think they should give the cold shoulder to India. I don't know what India is playing at. China, yeah, that's not surprising, but I really don't know what India's game is. Maybe it's because it's got heavy trade with Russia. I don't know. I really think India's missed an opportunity. I mean, it's the world's biggest democracy. They could really have this opportunity to show leadership. Um, Quite frankly, India's putting itself in a position where it's not entirely trustworthy. I mean, this isn't a question of being non-aligned or neutral. With its actions, India is basically, I mean, yeah, they may have condemned today's events, but they can go further. They can. They can stop sitting on the fence and they can back sanctions, or they can distance themselves from Russia, and they're not doing so. So I don't know what New Delhi's game is, and I think it's not doing them any favors in the eyes of other democracies. Um, but there's a lot of things going on with this situation at once. The Ukrainian advances was good news, but I knew, a lot of people speculated that there would be some sort of reprisal. This is obviously it. Um, that was great news the other day that those men returned to their families, but it was bittersweet for the family of Paul Yuri, the aid worker who was killed and probably tortured by Russian separatists. It shows the depravity of these people, the absolute callousness towards human life that Russia and its loyal thugs have. Putin has a total disregard for human life, and that, in my book, puts him on par with Hitler. And actually, with reports of Ukrainians being transported to Russia, um, really, he's not that far off what Hitler done. I mean, so far we haven't seen a world war, but we're getting closer. I really think it's a very dangerous situation. We haven't seen a genocide anywhere near the scale of the Holocaust, but I think Putin is prepared to do anything he sees as the as legitimate to, to take Ukraine. I think he's prepared to do anything if that means potentially sending thousands and thousands of Ukrainians to Russian gulags or re-education centers like what the Chinese are doing with the Uyghurs. I think he'll do it. Um, but these people today just trying to flee. I mean, if this is Russia's picture of democracy to the world, what the hell does that represent? Shelling people trying to flee, civilians? Just like Crimea in 2014, it's a sham. I'm not saying that there won't be pro-Russian people there, but when you have Kremlin hacks going door to door coercing people to vote a certain way, it's so yeah, I'm going to wrap this up soon because honestly, it's a very depressing subject, but I feel almost duty bound to talk about this because it's such an important thing, and this really is an escalation. Where does it go? I mean, Ukraine joins NATO. Russia uses that as an excuse. They'll accuse NATO of escalation. Um, let's put this in context. This is 15% of Ukraine's landmass. Ukraine's a big country. It's one of the biggest countries in Europe by area. I think actually, unless I'm mistaken, it's second only to Sweden. Um, so my point would be to those saying, well, oh, the Ukrainians should just give up their land. They should just opt for peace. Idiots like Roger Waters and other Putin shills who blame the Ukrainians, the most grotesque victim blaming, and then they claim that they're pacifists. I think it's beyond contemptible. But I would ask them. This would be the equivalent of something like I would imagine, say, East Anglia. That sort of proportion of the UK just being lopped off, or Southwest England, or the whole of Scotland. That's what we're talking about. 15% of Ukrainian land simply taken by Russia today. It's grotesque, and I don't think anyone in the world is going to recognize it, except maybe Belarus, North Korea. I don't think even the Chinese will recognize it as legitimate. Um, but where does this go? I think it's a very dangerous situation, and it's alarming. My concern is that there'll be war fatigue in the West, and the West will get tired of backing Ukraine, which I think would be a grave mistake because I don't think Putin's going to stop with Ukraine. So it's all very well, some Western politicians might be tempted to throw Ukraine under the bus, but we'll see what direction Italy takes. Giorgia Meloni's party definitely has dubious stances. Is probably she's probably now come to realize that taking an appeasing position like some of her allies, like Matteo Salvini and others, just isn't credible. Apparently, Brazil, incidentally, also abstained from the vote today. Um, why is that? Well, Brazil's got a presidential election coming up this weekend. I don't know. But I think Ukraine should take note of everyone who's backed Russia or appeased Russia. um, when all of this ends, make it clear that they're not welcome in Ukraine. I also think the more this escalates, the more we need to stigmatize those who support Putin. Now, I want to be clear what I mean by this, because people will be, I'll have a few Putinists in my comment section saying, "Oh, you're against free speech." Well, as it stands, if you have regular citizens who are making excuses for Putin, if they're not politicians or soldiers or police officers or involved in national security in any way, then I say, let them be worms, let them support Putin. But if you're going to take a position like that, just prepare to be very unpopular. I mean, I don't think these people can play the victim when they're defending uh, a fanatical tyrant. I mean, what the hell do they expect? I think they're treacherous. I have no problem saying that. And I don't give a damn about their opinions. I don't care about their feelings. I don't care, um, what sort of backlash they get. I don't support violence. I wouldn't support harassment or anything like that. But I'm talking purely in terms of verbal here. I think they're treacherous, and I think I've got zero respect for them. And some of them are quite prominent. I've total contempt for such people because why? If they were in Moscow, if they were Russian nationalists, it would sort of be understandable. But they're enjoying the comforts of a relatively free country, and Ukrainians are suffering day in and day out. They're fighting for the very survival of their country. And then you get these Putin chills in the West um, playing the devil's advocate for Putin. It does disgust me. That's just I'm not trying to be melodramatic here. It's just my sincere feeling. They disgust me. And by the way, if any of them come to my channel, I'm not going to be diplomatic. That's it. I'm not going to put on pretenses with these people because I've no respect for them. I'm not going to pretend I'll ever understand their thinking, whether they're just trying to be contrarian, whether they, more often than not, ties into anti-Semitism, interestingly enough. I'm not saying that it's directly connected, but you tend to find that people who are pro-Putin and they come out with all these anti-West conspiracy theories, they tend to come out with other positions as well that are, very dubious and often baseless. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, but I just don't know where this is going to go. I honestly think, I don't say this lightly. I don't generally wish death on anyone, but I genuinely believe if Putin died, whether it's from natural causes or something else, preferably natural causes, because if he was assassinated, that would trigger a crisis in of itself, and then Russian nationalists would want revenge and all the rest of it. But let's say Putin died of natural causes. I don't think there's anyone in Russia with the charisma, if that's the right word, or the personality cult that Putin has. So even if you had another hardliner taking over, I don't think it would have the same effect. Um, there are some very, very courageous Russians, and they should always be remembered. But I think of an event like that going on in Moscow, and I think of Western reporters. I mean, they're going to have thick skins because these Russian nationalists are total fanatics. That's why Roger Waters' comment was so pathetic, because he blamed Ukrainian nationalists, turning a total blind eye to the fanatical neo-nationalism that's going on in Russia. Um, it's grotesque. So I 100% stand by my critique of him and others. But who knows where this is going to go? It's not the only war in the world. The Syria war is far from over. There's been renewed clashes between Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, both sides blaming each other. A lot of the Central Asian republics, you get these sporadic the sporadic violence. Um, I just hope to God this ends soon because I don't know how much more suffering the Ukrainian people can take. They have the momentum, they have the morale, but they are suffering badly. And the world's suffering as a direct consequence of Putin's actions. This is the perverse thing about these tyrannies. It's the same with China. I mean, when I don't want to digress here too much, but when they basically tried to cover up COVID, when COVID spread around the world and dramatically impacted the world, that was a direct result of the culture of the CCP. Now, as a direct result of Putin's invasion of Ukraine, it's been a humanitarian crisis. Fuel prices are rocketing, and yeah, there's other factors as well, but it's definitely a big part of it. Um, Living costs are rocketing, and some of the world's poorest people are indirectly suffering as a result. Kremlin propaganda, of course, tries to smear the West with this. It's a grotesque lie. I mean, I'm so pleased that we got rid of RT, but I think it should have happened a lot sooner. I mean, these fanatics on Russian state media, they're like barking dogs. They're just pathetic people. I mean, I don't know how anyone could look at that stuff and say that we're dealing with rationality here, or we're dealing with. I mean, I don't get it. I understand that the Russian people were fed all these lies that the Ukrainian neo-Nazis were going to invade Russia, and they showed these dramatic images of Russian civilians killed and wounded, so they were riling up the anger in the Russian public. But it was all a lie, all of it. The Ukrainians are the victims, and it's so grotesque that you have a fanatical tyrant like Putin twisting it and saying, I mean, today he was talking about, well, America's the only country that used the A bombs, as if the circumstances of the end of World War II, 70, 72 years ago, are comparable to the circumstances today. It's complete deflection, and it's a very popular tactic of the Kremlin. What about? Well, it isn't the United States. It isn't CNN and Fox News that have been, having rants about bombing Russian cities. Well, okay, I don't know about Fox News, but CNN certainly hasn't. The BBC hasn't. It's Russian state media that has been getting into rants about nuclear war. So the lies and distortion coming from Russia is grotesque. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up because I'll just repeat myself. It's totally sickening, and I just hope this ends soon.